Okay, Solicitor.
Thank you. First item is a public hearing to adopt ordinance number 712, which is the Newtown Borough Neshaminy Creek Watershed Act 167 Stormwater Management Ordinance, implementing the requirements of the Neshaminy Creek Watershed Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan, which includes Little Neshaminy Creek Watershed. This ordinance was advertised in the advance of Bucks County on April 21, 2011. It was also lodged with the Bucks County Law Library on that same date, April 21, 2011. So adequate notice as required under the Borough Code for adoption of the ordinance has been provided, as well as appropriate advertising. There have been some comments to the draft that was initially advertised. Throughout the ordinance, I think there are one or two occasions where from the model ordinance it referenced Bucks or Montgomery counties. Obviously this only applies to Bucks County, so the references to Montgomery counties with council's approval would be removed. I also received additional comments eliminating the words inches or feet from certain calculations. Having reviewed the ordinance, that's sort of a use that's consistent throughout the ordinance, so I would recommend that that language remains as it was. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to adopt the ordinance as advertised.
Make this motion.
So moved.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. So we have the, at this point, council can speak to this ordinance, which is based on the model Neshaminy watershed ordinance that was produced by the Bucks County Planning Commission. Comments? No? Okay, now I have to open it up to the public. Does public?
I have comments.
Sure, I'm sorry.
In yesterday's Courier, I believe, there was an article regarding some unrest that apparently has been surfacing throughout the watershed from different municipalities. I forgot to bring it with me, and I don't know if anybody saw it or not. I'm just concerned that I know we have a date certain in terms of when we have to authorize this, but is the date certain tomorrow or next month? Because I do.
22nd, isn't it?
I believe it's either the 16th or the 22nd. I think it was moved.
I was just concerned that there might be something going on that we're not aware of, and I was going to ask Paul to look into it. But
What was the?
there's an article where municipalities are objecting to the conditions that are being set forth by the Neshaminy watershed.
Yeah, I think because I believe I saw the article also, there's basically a lot of pushback, and I think a lot of our discussions that we had at the work session were consistent with the sentiment, and that is basically that the ordinance imposes a lot of burden on homeowners. I think the example in the article was actually exactly some of the discussions we had at the work session, that basically if someone were to put a shed on their property, or put a deck, I think that's what they were talking about in the article, that you now need to get a special approval and you have to put in these stormwater management devices that previously you would not have had to do. And the article sort of expressed the sentiment that a lot of the municipalities were making it clear that they were doing it because they have to, but they were not doing it. They were doing it reluctantly. But at this point in time, I don't believe any changes have been made. I could certainly, I'm not aware of anything. I don't believe our engineer has heard of anything, and I don't believe any changes have been made. Certainly, Mary Ellen and I will keep our eyes open and see if there are any changes, because, of course, if at some point the demand and the requirement is relaxed, then the borough, based on comments that have been previously made, would probably want to consider changing the ordinance. But as it stands, it's consistent with the act, and the borough really doesn't have much of an option at this point in time.
Thank you.
I read the same article and initially had the same reaction Bob did. But you know, the reality is that this is pretty much a mandate, and we've got to enact an ordinance which was created as a model so there would be consistency throughout the county and all its municipalities subject to it. So I think the article accurately reflected what I'll call the involuntary nature of it, but it doesn't change the reality that we are required to adopt it by a date certain. That said, we also determined, I think at a work session, or maybe it was Planning Commission, I forget which, that some of the provisions were less draconian than we thought they were going to be. So not that that's great, but they didn't seem to be as onerous on smaller projects as we thought it might be.
Well, I believe that the revelation when we had a representative from the Planning Commission come down, from County Planning Commission come down and discuss it, was that for those smaller projects, it's essentially self-policing, that the borough does not need to impose any sort of application process or requirements, simply to let the applicant know that they do have requirements and obligations that they need to comply with, but the borough's not they don't have to submit any plans, they just need to do what needs to be done. It's sort of a weird situation, but it does it gives a little bit of ease. Of course, the applicant still has to comply, it's just that the mechanism is not necessarily there. And I think that that's something that's probably going to may become an issue at some time, but right now this ordinance is in compliance. So, and I know that Mary Ellen, our township engineer, and Joanne Brown, the borough zoning officer, have both been working on finalizing an application and a permit form that will comply with the act and also give some guidance. And I believe that Julie is working on a sort of an informational booklet for applicants to provide.
Right, just kind of rearranging that appendix so that it makes more sense to the person who has to create the plan. But I read the article as well, and I think there's some statements made in there that make it sound like it's really a whole lot worse than it is. But I think the other issue is that, yes, it seems like, oh, now I have to do some stormwater management on my property. Even if I do something small, the point is that you're controlling runoff, and that you have to control the first 2 inches of rain, which is not a lot of runoff. But if your neighbor put in a project like that and failed to control the runoff, and the runoff ended up in your yard, that you would be running to the borough to say, how come this person didn't control the runoff? So I think it may seem difficult to the homeowner may object, the person actually doing the project may object, but, if you're on the other side of the fence, your feeling would be different. So I should open this up to the public comment now. This is a public hearing on the stormwater management ordinance, and it is a 122-page ordinance, so those of you who have read it, kudos to you. Are there any comments from the audience regarding this? Okay, if not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And Marcia, I'll make those few changes and shoot you over an email with the...
I think there was a copy of the permit, too, that Joanne had. I saw that. Okay.
Yep. Next, with respect to the Lucas project on South Lincoln, this was discussed at work session. I'm asking for a motion to authorize the President of Council to execute an authorization to the bank to reduce the letter of credit to a 10% retainage, subject to extension of the letter of credit to March 17, 2012 for the Joseph Lucas project.
Give me a second.
I'll second.
Just to clarify, that project was approved, I believe, and accepted back in August, which would have started an 18-month period, which would end on February 12th. The existing letter of credit expires in December of 2011. I've spoken with the bank, and they'll work with us. So what you're authorizing the President to sign is a form right out of the development agreement, or the financial security agreement, rather. But I've added a line in there saying that it is subject to the extension of time to cover that full 18-month period.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. All right. Falling behind here. We discussed the special events ordinance last week at the work session, and an issue was raised with respect to how the ordinance addresses the permit fee for the application. The ordinance, when passed, included the application fee of $250 in the body of the ordinance. So what was recommended is that the ordinance be modified so that the application fee can just be an item on the fee schedule, and council can then set that every year when it establishes its new fee schedule. So the first item is a motion to authorize me to advertise an ordinance amending the special events ordinance. I had circulated that ordinance. Hopefully everyone was able to see it. Very simply, it changes the language of the ordinance, as I said, to remove the fee from the ordinance and place it into the fee schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
And again, this is just authorizing me to advertise the actual
Advertise,
ordinance.
just advertising,
Yep.
okay. If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And then in conjunction with that, it's not on the agenda, but what I would also request is authorization to advertise a resolution amending the 2011 fee schedule to change that fee, which is currently listed on the fee schedule, because even though it was in the ordinance, we still listed it on the fee schedule so that it was all in the same place, to change it from its current $250 per day to $25 per day.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just as a note on that, we discussed that at the police committee this morning also, and the chief recommended the $25 application fee without even knowing that we had discussed that last week at the work session.
Good. Okay. And just to clarify, the fee schedule resolution will also reflect that the fee for police as special services will be $60 per day, per hour?
Per hour per officer.
Because I do believe the current fee schedule might say 40, so I want to make sure.
That was the old, it was
that old?
increased,
Okay,
yeah.
so I want to make sure, it's in here, because it just lists those two items under that section.
Yeah.
So
But
if
it
it's the same
should be
thing-
60 per
Hour.
hour per officer.
Per officer, okay. Okay,
Okay, did we move and second this? We moved and seconded it. Did we
Yeah.
vote? We didn't vote yet.
didn't vote yet.
No. Okay.
Open to discussion.
I have a question. Is this, were we doing $250 a day, or is this?
The ordinance says $250 a day. Not anymore, though.
Why do we need to do it per day?
Just change the app.
I'm saying, why is
Yeah.
it a per day fee?
We had this discussion.
One of the issues that came up with that was a recurring event that might happen over a period of time. So if an event happened, let's say the first Monday of every month, that they would be able to apply a single time to approve it, but that there would be a fee. Because the fee, again, was intended to cover expenses in reviewing the event and figuring out what expenses might be and basic administrative expenses for that event. But
Aren't
again,
those expenses incurred upfront one time?
Well,
I'm going back to the discussion we had this morning. I mean, Tony was fairly vocal about, what it cost them to do it, but isn't that just a one-time expense up front? If it's a reoccurring event, all he's going to do would be then to apply the fee schedule associated with putting out uniformed officers.
what,
Can I ask for clarification on how the ordinance is written right now? Does it says $25 per day, or are we changing to say the application fee is set by council?
what it will say is that the person responsible for presentation and operation of any special event shall pay a permit fee in an amount to be established by Borough Council. That replaced
Okay.
$250
Okay.
for each day that the special event is scheduled.
Did it say that in the previous?
In the previous one, what it said, let me tell you exactly what it said. The person responsible for presentation and operation of any special event shall pay a permit fee equivalent to the sum of $250 per day for each day that the special event is scheduled. Said $250 per day representing the minimum cost for permit issuance and any other borough services.
That's the one you're revising up to. I'm talking about.
No, that's what it used to say. So all I'm doing is replacing, the new ordinance is simply replacing the $250 with, or replacing the words, the sum of $250 with an amount to be established by Borough Council.
But that's the original ordinance we have?
The
Or is that
original,
the updated ordinance?
no, the original ordinance says $250 per day.
$250 until this year.
We never had an events ordinance.
This just went into play,
That last summer.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just,
Yeah.
to answer your question, I think we could go either way on this, but I think the example that Paul gave, in which it's every Monday,
Right.
there is some administrative costs in the chief
Yeah.
scheduling for each of those Mondays. I could envision something like a carnival on our new piazza,
Oh, yeah.
where it might last for 6 consecutive days, and there's
Super
only
Bowl party.
right.
Last 4 days.
But I would be inclined to leave it at the per day for now.